The highway stretched endlessly under the dim glow of streetlights, cutting through the quiet night like a ribbon of asphalt. The black SUV moved smoothly in the right lane, its driver, Eleanor Davis, keeping a steady grip on the wheel. She had been driving for nearly an hour, her mind still occupied with the classified briefing she had just left. As the newly appointed director of the FBI, long nights and intense workloads had become her norm. But tonight, something felt off. The flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror pulled her attention away from her thoughts. Eleanor's brow furrowed as she instinctively checked the speedometer, exactly 65 miles per hour, right at the speed limit. She wasn't swerving, wasn't driving recklessly. There was no legitimate reason for her to be pulled over. Still, years of law enforcement experience told her to follow protocol. She signaled right, smoothly guiding her SUV to the shoulder. She exhaled slowly, keeping both hands visible on the steering wheel. She had worked alongside police officers her entire career. She understood procedure. She respected it. But something about this stop sent a nagging warning through her instincts. The patrol car behind her sat still for far too long. Why wasn't the officer approaching? Eleanor adjusted her rearview mirror, trying to catch a glimpse of him. Finally, the door swung open and the officer emerged. He was a broad-shouldered man with a stiff, almost aggressive posture. His left hand hovered near his belt, just inches from his firearm, while his right hand swung a flashlight back and forth. As he approached her window, Eleanor pressed the button to roll it down, keeping her hands where he could see them. "Evening, officer," she said, her voice calm and professional. The officer didn't return the courtesy. Instead, he shined the flashlight directly in her face, too long, too intrusively. "License and registration," he demanded. No explanation, no reason for the stop. Eleanor resisted the urge to sigh. This wasn't standard protocol. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" she asked evenly. The officer, whose nameplate read Turner, ignored her question. He chewed his gum slowly, staring at her a beat too long, then repeated, "License and registration." Eleanor didn't move right away. Her instincts, the same ones that had saved her life countless times, told her this wasn't routine. She chose her words carefully. "Sir, I'm reaching for my purse on the passenger seat." No response. She moved slowly, retrieved her wallet, and held up both her driver's license and FBI credentials. The officer's eyes flickered over the badge. His expression didn't change. "FBI, huh?" She nodded. "Yes, sir." Silence. Then, in a voice colder than before, Turner said, "Step out of the vehicle." And that was the moment Eleanor knew this was no ordinary traffic stop. Eleanor blinked, processing the demand. There was no valid reason for her to exit the vehicle. She had followed protocol, she had identified herself, remained calm, kept her hands visible. And yet, Officer Turner was treating her like a threat. "Excuse me?" she asked, keeping her voice firm but controlled. Turner took a half step back, his stance shifting slightly, his right hand now resting just inches from his holster. "Step out," he repeated. The tension in the air thickened. Eleanor knew that refusing a direct order could escalate the situation, but complying would mean putting herself at his mercy. She had read enough reports to know how quickly things could spiral. She kept her hands steady on the wheel. "Officer, I have complied with all legal requests. I've identified myself. May I ask again, on what grounds am I being asked to step out of the car?" Turner's jaw clenched. He wasn't used to being questioned. "I don't have to explain myself to you." That was a lie. He did. The law required officers to provide a reason for any stop, especially if they demanded a driver exit their vehicle. Eleanor inhaled slowly. She had dealt with men like him before, men who mistook authority for dominance. But this wasn't a corporate meeting or a political negotiation. This was a dark highway, and the man in front of her had a badge, a gun, and a temper. Then, before she could respond, Turner did something worse. He reached for the door handle, and that's when Eleanor knew this was no longer about the law. This was about control. The sharp metallic click of the door handle sent a jolt through Eleanor's body. Not fear, not yet, but a sharp awareness. This was no longer a traffic stop. It was something else entirely. Her left hand shot out, gripping the inside handle before Turner could yank it open. "Sir, step back," she ordered, her voice measured but firm. "You're outside of protocol." Turner didn't budge. If anything, his grip on the door tightened, his knuckles turning white. He was pushing, testing, seeing how far he could go. Then, the low hum of another engine cut through the night. Eleanor flicked her gaze toward the rear-view mirror just as a second patrol car rolled to a stop behind Turner's cruiser. The red and blue lights reflected off the pavement, casting eerie shadows across the scene. For the briefest second, relief flickered through her mind. Another officer meant a witness, but that relief died the moment she saw who stepped out. A tall, broad-shouldered man, no visible nameplate in the glare of the headlights, moved toward them with calculated ease. He wasn't asking questions. He wasn't assessing the situation. He was here with purpose. "Problem here?" he asked, his tone almost casual. Turner smirked, the corner of his mouth twitching like he had just won something. "Just dealing with a non-compliant driver." Eleanor's pulse remained steady, but inside, her mind was running the calculations. One officer was bad. Two? That was a trap. The second officer stepped closer, adjusting his belt. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." Not Director Davis, not even Ms. Davis. Just "ma'am," the way officers spoke when they had already decided you had no power. And that's when Eleanor knew she was outnumbered, and they knew it. Eleanor felt the shift. It wasn't just in their stance, it was in the air itself, thick with unspoken violence. She had been in dangerous situations before. Hostage negotiations, high-stakes interrogations, international counterterrorism briefings. But this was different. This wasn't a war zone. It was a stretch of American highway. And she was unarmed. She kept her hands where they could see them. Any sudden movement could be misread, or worse, deliberately misinterpreted. "I haven't been given a reason for detainment," she said, her voice steady. Turner exhaled through his nose, an almost amused sound. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough to make the threat feel personal. "You think that badge makes you untouchable? You think you can pull rank on me?" Eleanor said nothing. She wouldn't engage, wouldn't give him what he wanted. Turner's fingers twitched near his belt. A split second of hesitation, a decision being made. Then, without warning, he grabbed her wrist. Too hard, too fast. Eleanor instinctively pulled back, not violently, just enough to break his grip. Turner's eyes darkened. The second officer took a step closer, placing a hand on his radio. "We got a problem here?" he asked, a note of expectation in his voice. Turner tightened his jaw. Then he said the words Eleanor had read in too many reports before. "I think she's resisting." Her stomach turned. That's when Turner's hand dropped to his holster, and before Eleanor could react, the gun was inches from her face. Eleanor's breath stayed even, her hands still raised, palms open. But her mind was calculating every possible outcome. Turner's finger hovered dangerously close to the trigger, his breathing shallow, his eyes locked on hers. She had seen this moment too many times before, not personally, but in case files, in reports, in grainy body cam footage that always seemed to start too late and end too soon. And she knew exactly how it would be written if she didn't make it out alive. But before she could speak, a voice cut through the night. "Hey, I'm recording this!" The words hit like a gunshot. Turner flinched. Not much, just enough. Eleanor didn't dare move, but she could see it. The hesitation, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. For the first time since this started, he wasn't in control. Her gaze barely shifted, just enough to see the man standing near the edge of the road. He held up his phone, the screen glowing in the darkness, camera pointed directly at them. "You sure you want to do this, officer?" the man called out. His voice wasn't shaky. It was steady, confident. Turner's jaw clenched. The second officer shifted uneasily, as if suddenly aware that this wasn't going to disappear into silence like so many others. Eleanor saw it, the calculation in their faces, the growing awareness that they had lost the upper hand. And then, in the distance, sirens. Faint at first, but growing louder. Turner's fingers loosened around the gun. For the first time since this started, Eleanor knew she might just make it out alive. The wailing sirens grew louder, their piercing cry slicing through the night. Red and blue lights flashed across the pavement, bouncing off Turner's rigid frame. Backup had arrived, but not for him. Eleanor held her ground, watching as the second officer took an instinctive step back, his hand slipping away from his belt. He knew this wasn't going to end the way they had planned. Turner, however, was still gripping his weapon, his knuckles white. Then came the voice that changed everything. "Director Davis?" The words rang out from the first officer stepping out of a newly arrived squad car, his uniform marked with a lieutenant's insignia. His eyes flicked between Eleanor, hands raised, unwavering, and Turner, still clutching his gun. Turner barely reacted, but his partner stiffened visibly, his mouth parting as if searching for an excuse. The lieutenant took another step forward, assessing the situation with a practiced gaze. "What the hell is going on here?" Eleanor lowered her hands, not in surrender, in reclamation. "Officer Turner pulled a weapon on me after an unlawful stop," she stated, her voice cool, unwavering, "and his partner backed him up. I want them detained, now." Turner let out a breathless scoff, the disbelief raw in his voice. "You've got to be kidding me." The lieutenant's expression didn't change. He didn't even hesitate. "Cuff them both." The click of the handcuffs was a sound Eleanor would never forget. For the first time that night, it wasn't her freedom at risk. It was theirs. Turner's face twisted in disbelief as the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. His partner, once so confident, stood frozen, his eyes darting between Eleanor and the other officers. Eleanor watched without satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge. This was about accountability. As Turner was led toward a waiting squad car, he jerked against the officer's grip. "This is a misunderstanding," he spat, his voice edged with desperation. Eleanor tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Then, let's clear it up at headquarters," she said. "I'm sure Internal Affairs and the DA will be very interested." Turner went silent, his mind racing, grasping for an escape that didn't exist. For the first time, he was on the wrong side of the law. Nearby, the lieutenant turned toward Eleanor. "Director Davis, would you like to press charges personally?" Eleanor shook her head. "This isn't personal, it's systemic." She stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "I want full transparency, their disciplinary records, every complaint filed against them. I want an official investigation not just into these two, but into the patterns that allowed them to thrive." The lieutenant hesitated not out of reluctance, but out of understanding. He knew exactly what this meant. After a beat, he nodded. "I'll make the call." Eleanor inhaled deeply, the weight of the night settling in. This wasn't just about two corrupt cops. It was about the ones who had never been caught. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't just watching justice almost happen. She was making sure it did. The fallout came fast. By dawn, the footage had gone viral. News anchors dissected every frame, legal analysts debated the officers' actions, and public outrage ignited like wildfire. By noon, the Justice Department had announced a formal investigation. Officer Turner had been stripped of his badge and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. His partner, once so quick to back him up, was suspended indefinitely. The police department issued a statement, the kind carefully crafted for damage control, expressing deep concern while subtly distancing itself. But the world had already seen the truth, and the truth had consequences. Eleanor watched it all unfold from her office, her fingers steepled under her chin. The case wasn't over, not by a long shot. She had spent years watching justice nearly happen, tangled in red tape and politics. Not this time. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. Normally she wouldn't answer. Tonight, she did. "Director Davis," a voice asked. She recognized it instantly, the bystander who had recorded everything. "I just wanted to say, I appreciate what you're doing. Most people wouldn't." Eleanor leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Most people don't have the power to." A pause. Then quietly he said what she had been thinking all night. "They do this all the time, just not to someone like you." That truth settled deep in her chest. Eleanor had survived the night. But how many others hadn't? She glanced at the case file on her desk, the first of many. This wasn't just about what had happened. It was about making sure it never happened again. This story isn't just about a single abuse of power. It's about a system that enables it. It's a reminder that injustice thrives in silence, and those who misuse their authority count on people looking away. But accountability doesn't happen by accident. It happens when people refuse to let the truth be buried, when bystanders step in, when leaders demand transparency, when ordinary citizens refuse to accept just the way things are. In a world where power can be easily abused, vigilance is a responsibility we all share. Whether it's recording an incident, demanding policy changes, or simply questioning authority when it oversteps, change starts with refusing to ignore what is wrong. Eleanor Davis had power and influence, but what happens to those who don't? How many times has this story played out without cameras, without consequences? Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty, it's about preventing the next victim. The lesson is clear: speak up, pay attention, hold those in power accountable. Because if injustice can happen to one, it can happen to anyone. And the only way to stop it is to refuse to look away. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one.